So I'm really glad that you are here this morning. I appreciate you getting up so early and coming. If we'd really done sunrise, you'd have had been an hour ago, and there'd have been even fewer of us. So thank you for doing this. I appreciate your presence. And you know, I'm sort of glad that we're here. I mean, the weather, could it be any better? And I was going to look at the weather in New York City, or in Chicago, or in Detroit, and so I could feel smug about the fact that here in the South, the nature cooperates with Easter. I grew up here, and I've done most of my ministry in the South, so I'm used to, as a preacher, having flowers and trees cooperate with my Easter sermon. They sort of come alive, and it reminds everyone that that's what Easter really is all about. But I'll tell you, the other day, I saw two red birds on the ground. And as I looked a little closer, I noticed they were actually eating ice creams that someone had dropped. And I looked at them, and I realized, oh, they are Baskin Robbins. All right, I know I'm on Rocky Road now. But I think the road to Easter, the road to the tomb, is a rocky road. The women got up early, before dawn even. And it makes them sound like they're heroes, at least on the Sabbath. To me, it makes it sound like if you get up that early, you really are a heroic person. But the truth is, they were so filled with grief that they couldn't sleep. And probably all of us have had times in our lives when we've lost people or even pets. And the grief was so heavy that we just couldn't sleep on it. So since they couldn't sleep, they went ahead and got up anyway. And they did as women would do. They found something to do. They went back to the tomb where they had been the previous Friday. Jesus died on the Sabbath, and he died in the late afternoon. So they didn't have time to fully embalm the body before sunset and the Sabbath began. So they did a partial job, and on this morning, they were going back to finish it, to do the last things they could do for Jesus. And of course, you know the story. They got there, and the tomb was empty. You read part of the story, and I read I read the story from a different gospel, and so you may have heard a couple of differences in there. The one that you read, there was only Mary. In the one that I read, it was Mary and Joanna and Mary Magdalene and the other women. And the other two Gospels tell the story slightly differently as well. Now, for some folks, particularly fundamentalist people, that sort of creates this conflict. Is the Bible wrong? Is it contradicting itself? How can it be infallible and tell the story four completely different ways? But I think for us as progressive Christians, those differences actually bear witness to the truth of the story. If you've ever been in an accident or been on a jury, you've heard how witnesses see things differently. And sometimes you think, were you at the same event? And that's kind of the way it is with this. You think, are you talking about the same thing? But that's the way real things happen. And this was real to them. They found the tomb empty. In my version, there were two angels. In the first version we read, there was only one, but however many they were, they said to them a question that I think we should ask ourselves on a regular basis. Why do you seek the living among the dead? Or why do we seek life from sources that are not themselves alive? And I think we fall into that trap so often. Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen, just as he told you back when you were with him in Galilee. Go and tell the rest. And so they ran to tell the other disciples. Now, the men were a lot slower getting up that morning, I suppose, or at least they didn't go to the tomb. It wasn't that they weren't grief-stricken as well. It is just how men are. They don't show their grief, at least in the same ways, I suppose, even back then. And so they came to bear witness to the men, but they didn't believe them. It's not surprising, actually, because in that day, in the sexism of that day and age, women were not allowed to give testimony in court. Their testimony was not deemed to be respectable and trustworthy. So here we are, the women are telling the men, and they just don't believe it. It is interesting, I think, to me, that Jesus chose those whose testimony the world might reject to be the first witnesses of the most important event in human history and the first witnesses of resurrection. We have worked on, as progressive Christians, getting rid of that sexism and labeling it as sinful, because we believe that women's testimonies is at least as trustworthy as men. And in fact, next Sunday, and we will install the first woman pastor of this church in its 150-year history. And so we will celebrate that. We believe that women's testimony, women's witness, is at least as trustworthy and powerful as men's. So we will hear the witness of a woman as the followers of Jesus. But the men had a hard time. It's interesting. The version I read said they thought it was an idle tale. But that word gets translated differently in different versions of the gospel when you read it. An idle tale. They were delirious. They were delusional. They didn't believe them. Or if they had been, in fact, Southerners, they would have patted them on the shoulders and said, "Bless your heart." And so that's what essentially is happening. The guys are saying to the women, "Bless your heart." And Luke, who we believe was a physician, and Saint Luke is the patron saint of physicians and those in the healing industry. Luke, who wrote the gospel that I read to you, said the word that he used as interpreted idle tale is really delirious. It is a medical term. It's a medical term that Luke, as a doctor, might have used if a patient had come to him with a high fever and been delirious. That's what the word really means. Delirious with fever. And so Luke is saying they thought the women were delirious with a fever. And I want to suggest to you this morning that they were. Somewhere in that tomb, the emptiness of it, they caught the Easter fever. And Christians have been delirious with Easter ever since. We have been burning up with the good news that life cannot be conquered by death, that life cannot be overcome by darkness, that love cannot be subdued by hate. That's our faith. We are people infected with the Easter fever. It isn't that we don't believe in death. We do believe death is real. After all, we are people of the cross. We are people who bear witness to the fact that Jesus died, but he didn't stay dead. We believe that death is not the period, but a comma. And our God is still speaking life even to us beyond the grave. I think we are a church infected with Easter fever. And when I came here almost 4 years ago, there was some concern about whether or not this church would even survive, whether we had declined so far that we could come back. But your leadership thought you could. And they invited me to come and take that journey with you. And here today, we are alive and well, and last year we did more for missions than we've ever done, and the future is as bright as it's ever been, because we have been infected with Easter fever. We were down. but we refuse to stay down. The predictions of the death of this church were very premature. Your obituary was printed, and they had to tear it up because you are alive today as witnesses that you are an Easter people. We believe life always conquers death. Sooner or later, not in the short term always, but sooner or later. We believe and are a witness that light dispels darkness. And because of your radical inclusion and your commitment to love, we believe that love, all love, ultimately overcomes hate. You know, this is my fourth Easter with you, and because I preached twice one year, so this is my fifth Easter sermon with you. And I've always said this particular line in every one of them. And since this might or might not be my last Easter Sunday sermon with you, I'm going to say it to you again. If I ask a 6-year-old what Easter means, they say bunny rabbits and candy and Easter eggs. If I ask a 16-year-old what does Easter mean, it means Jesus rose from the dead or something like that. But if I ask an 86-year-old what Easter means, she will say to me, it means I've just begun to live. That's the message I hope you take from this today. You are here today because you have been infected by an Easter fever, because you believe in Easter. Because if you don't believe in Easter, what is there to put faith in? You are here early in the morning as witnesses that you believe in Easter, that it is true, or at least that you hope that it is true. And since none of us have ever died, whatever you believe happens after death. You believe it by faith. And so I would just say to you, Easter people infected with Easter fever, they gamble on the good. They gamble on God. They gamble on the goodness of God. They gamble on the love of God. They gamble on life's tenacity. Either way, it's a gamble. But gamble on the good. Because Easter fever is the only fever on earth that leaves you stronger, better, active. So let it run its course and infect your whole life, because you are Easter people. Let us pray. So pour out your Spirit upon us once more, O God, filling us with your very presence. I thank you for those who have gathered here in early morning to hear the birds sing, the breeze blow, the wind rustle, the flowers bloom. We believe in life. And even when it is a struggle or a challenge, we still believe in life. And when we come to that final door and open it and walk into your presence, may it be that belief in life that carries us home. And may we look back at all the people we have helped infect with Easter fever. Amen.